God already knows what we need before we ask Him. Every prayer that we offer, every grace that we expect, everything that we need, God has already answered it, even before we ask. Now that's an amazing, amazing statement, and sometimes it blows our mind. God has already answered the prayers that you ask of Him before you ask them. Because God knows what we need. God knows what we need, even when we ourselves don't know what we need. Most of our praying is about finding and figuring out what exactly we should be praying for, and what exactly we do need in our lives, and in the lives of our loved ones, and those we pray for. But God has already given the grace. He has already answered the prayer, because He is God. And so we might ask ourselves, well then, why bother praying at all if God has already answered my prayers? It's like this. God's grace, the answer to our prayers, is like a wonderful rainstorm. There is grace and goodness pouring down upon us all the time. But we, however, prefer to walk under umbrellas. And so we put up our umbrellas, and many times we don't receive all of the grace and all of the strength and all of the answers to our prayers because we have decided what we are going to receive and what we are not going to receive. And it's only when finally we take down the umbrella that we are saturated and soaked with God's goodness, His strength, His grace. And that's what prayer does. Prayer doesn't change God. God has already given us what we need. Prayer changes us. Prayer changes others. It begins to open our heart. It begins to take down the barriers. It begins to align us with the will of God so that we're capable of accepting and receiving the grace that He pours out upon us. And it is that grace, once we receive it, then, Lord, finally you've answered my prayers. Oh no, finally you have let me answer your prayers. That's the real trick. That's the real miracle. Because God is always giving. He's always giving and pouring out. We see that as an example today in this account of Jesus taking Peter, James, and John up the mountain of Transfiguration. They're on their way to Jerusalem. They're making their final journey with Jesus. And He's just told them what's going to happen. And so they're probably worried, they're probably frightened. And of course, when they get there and the events begin unfolding over the course of the week, they'll be more confused and more frightened. And indeed, when Christ is finally arrested and crucified, we see their faith shaken tremendously. But here, Jesus gives them the grace they will need for that moment, long beforehand. He has already begun giving them the strength that they will need to persevere. He shows them the resurrection today. In His transfiguration, He opens Himself up and He reveals to them His resurrection, His divinity. He shows them this so that when all of this happens in a while, they'll have this memory in the back of their minds. They'll carry this with them. It's the grace that they need to go through the events of Holy Week. It's a grace that God gives them even before they know they need it and before they ask for it. But it's a grace that has effect. Peter, James, and John are the three that are taken up to witness this miracle. And when they come down, they don't process it all, of course. But it is this strength that will keep John at the cross. It is this grace that will allow him to stand next to the Blessed Mother and witness Jesus die. It is the grace of knowing that something bigger is going on than what I see with my eyes. and that there is some light that is going to shine, that there is some resurrection that's going to happen. I know that. I've seen it. And John holds that in his heart with great love. And it will be John who on resurrection morning runs to the tomb first. It is the fire of that vision that says, it finally happened. It's happening now. What I saw on the mountain is happening. I've got to go see it. And it is that grace that moves him along. Peter responds in a totally different way. Peter, you and I know, rejects Jesus, denies him 3 times. But it is the grace of this resurrection that he already sees that will give him the grace that he needs in that moment to be sorry for that denial, to convert from that denial, and to be the one who will later strengthen his fellows in professing the resurrection. The grace of the resurrection that he sees now strengthens him so that, unlike Judas, he doesn't despair in what he has done, and he doesn't take his own life, but rather he is brought to conversion, and he remembers this is not the end. We have to keep going. And this grace will carry Peter behind John to the tomb, and will actually allow him to enter into the tomb before John, and to witness what has happened. The grace already given. And of course, James, he will be the first of the apostles to die in witness to Jesus Christ. Herod will have him executed before all the others. And it is this grace of the resurrection that allows him to stand there and not back down. I know that Jesus is risen. You cannot take that away from me. I have seen it not once but twice. And now I prepare to see it for myself. It is this grace already given. But notice that as Jesus gives them this grace, as he answers their prayers, he doesn't take away the cross. The cross still remains. They still have to go through the arrest, through the trial, through the scourging, through the cross, through the burial, and through the waiting on that Holy Saturday. They still have to go through it, but they have received the grace that will carry them through it. And so it is with us, that Jesus, God, has already given us the graces we need in our lives. And our prayers now open our own hearts so that when we have to go through the crosses, when we have to go through our difficulties and bear our torments and sufferings and whatever this world is going to throw at us, that we will have the strength to make it through. We will have the grace to overcome. We will have the hope of Peter and James and John, because we have seen the resurrection, and because God has already anticipated our needs. And so rather than despairing, Lord, why do my prayers not get answered? Why is your grace not pouring out? Know that you already possess what you have. Know that you already have the strength and grace of God. It changes everything. You know, when we try to find God sometimes in the mess of things, it's like looking into the light. If you look directly into that light, what's going to happen? You're only going to see darkness. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? To look directly at the light and everything goes black. And so it is sometimes when we try to find God. Where are you, God? Why are you not showing yourself? But rather, God sometimes prefers to stand behind us and let his light shine over our shoulder, which then illumines everything in front of us, and we see our lives differently. And we see all of our crosses and all of our struggles and all of those things in our life, we see them differently because now we see them in the light of Christ. It changes everything. The transfiguration changes, really, not just how we see things, but it actually changes the things we see, because God's grace transforms. So as you make your way through this Lenten season and through every day of your lives, remember, God has already answered your prayers. Already. It makes prayer easier. God has already answered your prayers. He has already given the grace. Now our job is to keep praying so that we align ourselves with the graces that are being poured out before us. Sometimes it means altering our prayer a little bit. Sometimes it means changing a little bit what we are asking for so that God's grace may come upon us. Peter, James, and John climbed the mountain of transfiguration, and they experienced the resurrection, the light that will carry them through their crosses. So whatever cross, whatever difficulty, whatever struggle you carry, know that the resurrection is also already present in it. And that will give you the strength to go through it to the resurrection.